Good morning, Doug. What else can you tell us about this televised address that we just heard from Vladimir Putin?
Let's start from scratch. This was a speech that was a signature of Vladimir Putin, a grievance-filled rant full of propaganda and full of lies. Not an opinion, simply a statement of fact. This was a speech that was similar in tone to the one that we heard on the eve of the invasion back in late February, when he basically spoke of the urgent need to liberate territories that had come under the control of what he termed Ukrainian Nazis, territories that he said had to be so-called demilitarized, a speech that tried to justify that invasion. And we heard that now reverberating, but much more intensely today, because this speech came at a time where Putin is essentially reeling from what has been a series of quite devastating setbacks in parts of the Kharkiv region, on other fronts as well. Obviously, the Russian army is giant and is still waging a war and has made its own advances and is holding more than holding its own in many places. But the reality is that he has been facing a lot of losses. He's been struggling to recruit soldiers to the cause. He has been also under a furious tide of international criticism for what leader after leader coming to the podium at the UN General Assembly has seen as termed a war of Russian aggression, an unprovoked war, a war that is basically not only destroying destroying Ukraine, but also ruining his own country, Russia. What we heard Vladimir Putin doing today is doubling down on all of his time-honored themes, all of his grievances, referring once again to Ukrainian, quote, Nazis torturing civilians in areas that Ukraine controls. Very rich, considering what we have seen, what the world has seen in stark images in Mariupol, in Bucha, in Irpin, in Izium. So on and so on. He called for a partial mobilization. There had been a lot of speculation whether this so-called mobilization, which is tantamount to a draft, he's been trying to wage this war as a so-called special military operation, a term he used again today in this address to his compatriots. While he's still calling that, the call for a partial, and he used that word partial mobilization, which is essentially a partial draft, is an acknowledgement that he can no longer simply pick off soldiers from Dagestan, Chechnya, recruiting them from prisons. He's going to need some sort of ensured reserve force of manpower going forward. He knows that this is a battle that is being joined in earnest right now by Ukraine, facing setbacks. So this partial mobilization is, in a sense, a feared escalation. We had been talking about the fear of an escalation in whatever Vladimir Putin says today. So this, in a sense, is that type of escalation. Also, the West bashing, another hallmark of the Vladimir Putin ideology, his speechifying, the West being out to destroy Russia. He spoke about that again today. The West, the West being to blame for the fighting in and around the nuclear power plants, putting the onus on Europe, the U.S., and the West. Russia is pure. Russia is noble. The hard-bidden, discriminated against Russian speakers on Ukrainian territory living in Ukraine, what is still sovereign Ukraine. These people need to urgently be liberated. They need to be protected. And he reiterated the fact these referendums are going to take place. And not only will they take place in these regions, these Russian-occupied regions, Donetsk and Luhansk and Zaporizhia and Kherson in the south. Not only will they take place, but he has vowed to provide security and secure conditions for people to vote in these referendums in order that they may be freed and liberated. We heard that word resounding many times throughout the speech, this idea of freeing hard-pressed, discriminated against Russian-speaking people in territories right now in Ukraine.
It's going to be interesting to see how that draft announcement goes over in Russia.
Yeah.
Douglas Herbert, thank you very much, as always, for your analysis.